Hello guys, I hope you're all well. Today I'm going to be talking about another story from the Bible. I'm going to be talking about a man called Jacob. So I'm going to read it straight from the Bible this time. This is my Bible. As you can see, it's a little bit of a mess. It's a bit dirty, the cover's been ripped off. It's like this not because I don't take care of it, it's because I read it an awful lot. So I'm going to be reading from Genesis, which is right at the beginning of the Bible here. It's the first book and it's all about beginnings. I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 28, if I can find it, verses 10, and I'll read up to verse 15, I think. Let's go. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending. Oh, I've lost my place. And the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Okay, so let's recap that story quickly. This story was about a man called Jacob. He was actually on a journey somewhere, and along the way of that journey, night came and he had to have a sleep. So he lay down, and whilst he was asleep, he had a very special dream. He dreamt about a ladder that went all the way from the earth up to heaven, and he dreamt that on that ladder, angels of God were moving up and down that ladder. And he dreamt of God being at the top of that ladder and speaking to him and promising him that he would be with him forever. Now, there's three men mentioned in this story. The first man that we hear about is a man called Abraham. Now, Abraham was Jacob's grandfather, and a long time before this story took place, before Jacob had this dream, God had spoken to Abraham, Jacob's grandfather, and told him that he was going to be the father of a mighty nation of many, many people. And God also promised that he would give those descendants of Abraham, or Abraham's children, he would give them somewhere to live. And God also told Abraham that through his descendants, or through his children, all of the people in the world would be blessed through one of those children. The story comes here when the story about Jacob's dream is when Jacob then hears about this promise that his grandfather and his father had received. This covenant promise was passed on then to Jacob, and Jacob at this time was probably beginning to understand that God's promise was for him as well. So I don't know if you know already, but this blessing that was promised to come through Jacob, or from Abraham through Isaac and Jacob and his children and his children and his children, that promise of a blessing to all of the people in the world was in fact the promise that our Saviour would come thousands of years later. And that was the Son of God, who's Jesus Christ, who was promised right from the beginning of the Bible. In that very, very early on, God already had a plan in place to use this family to bless us all with his Son, Jesus Christ, who comes to save us from all of our sins. Now, I think this story is very important. This story about Jacob having this dream and hearing from God really deeply for the first time. Because I think before this time, Jacob perhaps hadn't really realised that God was with him. I'm sure he heard the stories from his father. He may have heard the stories told to him about his grandfather. But you know, in this story, God spoke directly to Jacob. And it's at this point, I think, that Jacob really realizes, oh, God is in this place. You know, he's really real and he's really with me and he cares about the things that I'm doing. And that was the time that Jacob really started to have a very personal relationship with God, not just a relationship that came from the stories about his father and his grandfather. And, you know, I really want you to understand the importance of this, that, you know, it's really lovely when we hear wonderful stories about the great things that the wonderful Christian people in our family have done. But, you know, that's really not enough. Each and every one of us, we have to have that personal contact with God. We have to begin to personally start having a relationship and to realise that God is acting in our lives. You know, each and every one of us, we need to become part of the story ourselves. So I would like us to do a little craft activity today. We're going to make something, and the reason we're doing this is to really help us think about this story of Jacob's dream and to help us remember it as well. So what I have is I've got a piece of blue paper. I've chosen blue because, do you remember Jacob dreamt of a ladder that went all the way from the earth up to the heavens? So I thought the blue would represent the sky, because especially these days the sky's been nice and blue, hasn't it? So I've got some lollipop sticks, which I picked up from Poundland, if you're wondering where you can find these, or any crafting store. So I have got myself some glue. So I'm going to get a little plate. You should probably get a dish. I've got the lid of a plastic box here. Now, I'm just going to tip the glue out. Might be a bit messy, but don't worry about most glues, you can clean up pretty easily afterwards. So I'm going to stick down and build up my ladder. So you can see I've stuck these lollipop sticks already to the paper there. For these bits at the end, you might have to snap the lollipop sticks just to make some shorter pieces. So I can get the glue. You could paint on the glue, but I'm just going to drag the lollipop stick through the glue, and I don't mind if I get a little bit messy when I do this. And I'm going to press the lollipop stick down onto the paper and just hold it there for a second to give it a chance to start drying, but it'll take a while. Okay, and what I can do is I can build up my ladder. Do you see I could just keep on adding the lollipop sticks here until the ladder goes all the way from the earth and all the way up to the heavens. Do you remember where Jacob dreamt that God was at the top of that ladder and whilst he was asleep at the bottom? Now what I can do is I can take my lollipop sticks and I can get more glue. This time I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the ends of the lollipop sticks. These are the rungs or that you would climb on if you wanted to climb up the ladder. And I'll stick this down. Oops, that's not stuck very well, has it? So you might have to leave that for a while before it dries properly. Now what I've got as well is a Sharpie or a black pen, and on my lollipop sticks I've written some words. We can write them across the ladder, and this is to help you remember what this story was about. What I've written is God keeps his promises. God keeps his promises. And that's what I want you to learn and remember from today's lesson, is that God always keeps his promises. Now do you see how I'm building up this ladder here? Now what am I going to write on the bottom? Which I seem to have lost my last and most important stick, so I'm going to write it out again. Is on the bottom stick, I'm going to write down whereabouts I can find this story in the Bible. Now this is really, really important. Genesis is the book in the Bible where you can find this story. Now it's always important when you're talking about the Bible to tell people whereabouts they can find the story in the Bible. Now the reason we do this is so that you can check that the story is really there. Or, you know, it might be that sometimes people tell you a story that they think is in the Bible, but they make a mistake and it's actually not there at all. Or maybe when I tell the story, I might forget something really important. So you need to know, everybody needs to know, where they can find this story in the Bible so they can check it for themselves. Now this story about Jacob and his dream about the ladder is in Genesis It's in chapter 28, and I read verses 10 all the way up to verse 15. So if you're able to find your own Bible, you can read that story yourself. So I'm adding that on the end here. Look, Genesis chapter 28, verses 10 to 15, so that everybody knows exactly where they can find this story in the Bible. Now, I've actually finished. Oh, I almost forgot the most important bit. What I have here, well, maybe not the most important, but the prettiest bit. What I have here is some cupcake cases, and I thought these would make really good angels, because remember that Jacob dreamt about the angels moving up and down the ladder. So I've taken a cupcake case and squeezing it in the middle, and I think that makes a perfect angel. So I'm going to draw a little face with a smile, because I think the angels are happy most of the time. And I'm going to dip that in the glue there. Ooh. And where can we put that? We can put the angels moving up and down the ladder. So over here, as you might expect, there's one that I completed earlier. Here you can see Jacob's ladder on a nice blue background, and it says on here, God keeps his promises. Do you remember what promise that God made to Jacob through that dream? He promised Jacob that he would be the father of a huge nation of people, and he promised him that through his family there would be a blessing that would come to bless all the people on the earth. And he also promised Jacob that he would be with him wherever he went. And here you can see the angels of God moving up and down the ladder that Jacob dreamed of. Now, in this story, it's a really important time in Jacob's life, because he heard from God. God spoke directly to him through a dream. Now, God can speak to us in very many ways, and it's not only through dreams. God might speak to you through a dream, but there's other ways that God can speak to us. He can speak to us through his stories in the Bible, just like he can speak to us through this story. He can speak to us through the things that are happening to us, or through the people that we meet. He might speak to you in different ways. He might speak to you through a song or a poem, or through something that you see in your day-to-day life. So this week, what I would like you to do is I would like you to think about different ways, or any way in which you think God can show himself to you. So I would like you to think, this is a story about when Jacob heard from God through a dream, but does God speak to you in another way? Do you ever hear from God? Now, if you do, I would love for you to tell someone about it. I would love you to talk to someone and say, I know God is real, and I know that God is with me. And I would like you to tell them, how is it that you know that? God bless you all.